verlangt endlich die Bereitwilligkeit, ihm die Zusicherung zu geben, dass die deutschen Streitkräfte Staatsgebiet folgender unabhängiger Nationen nicht angreifen, und er nennt Finnland, Lettland, Litauen, Estland, Norwegen, Schweden, Dänemark, Niederlande, Belgien, Großbritannien, Irland, Frankreich, Portugal, Spanien, die Schweiz, Liechtenstein, Luxemburg, Polen, Ungarn, Rumänien, Jugoslawien, Russland, Bulgarien, Türkei, Irak, Arabien, Syrien, Palästina, Ägypten.
They were once seen as the most feared troops in Europe, instantly recognized by their black uniforms and strict discipline. But what happened to them after everything fell apart? When Nazi Germany collapsed in 1945, their story didn't just end, it took a sharp and unexpected turn. Some were captured and put on trial, others disappeared without a trace, and many tried to quietly start over. Years later, their final struggle wouldn't be fought on a battlefield, but over how history would remember them. May 1945 changed everything. Nazi Germany had surrendered, and across Europe, hundreds of thousands of Waffen-SS soldiers were laying down their weapons. These men, once presented as elite fighters, suddenly found themselves as prisoners or on the run in a broken and uncertain continent. The Allied powers moved quickly, ordering the complete shutdown of the SS in all its branches. From well-known divisions like Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler and Das Reich to smaller units formed in occupied regions, they were all rounded up by American, British, and Soviet forces. Many were marched into captivity still wearing the same uniforms that had made them so feared just weeks earlier. Then came the legal fallout, and it was massive. At the Nuremberg trials, held between late 1945 and 1946, prosecutors argued that the SS, including the Waffen-SS, had played a central role in the regime's actions. On September 30, 1946, the court officially declared the SS a criminal organization. That decision had serious consequences. Simply being a member could lead to punishment, although exceptions were made for those who were drafted later in the war or shown to have limited involvement. Across Germany, special courts were set up to sort through millions of cases. People were placed into categories ranging from major offenders to minor followers. For former Waffen-SS members, outcomes varied widely depending on their rank, where they served, and even local politics. Some high-profile figures, like SS Brigadier Führer Kurt Meyer, were tried and imprisoned for actions in Western Europe. Others faced trials connected to events in Italy, the Balkans, or the Eastern Front. But most lower-ranking soldiers were released fairly quickly, often within months, carrying records that followed them, but still able to rebuild their lives. Life in the prison camps was far from easy. Many detainees were held in rough, overcrowded conditions, sometimes out in the open with little protection from the elements. Disease, hunger, and uncertainty were constant problems. With so many prisoners to manage, Allied authorities focused on identifying those considered most responsible. By 1946 and 1947, large numbers of detainees were released, often stepping back into a world that had completely changed. Some returned to destroyed hometowns, while others remained in displaced persons camps, unsure of what came next. Not everyone stayed behind. A smaller number chose to escape Europe altogether. Using false documents and hidden networks, some former officers managed to leave Europe. Karl Nicolucci Lech, once a tank commander, made his way to Argentina in 1948, where he lived quietly under Juan Perón's government. Others found routes to countries like Spain, Syria, and Egypt. These movements later sparked stories about so-called rat lines, secret escape paths that are still debated and studied today. Then came another turning point. In May 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany was established, opening a new chapter for the country and for the men who had once worn those uniforms. The new government faced a huge challenge, rebuilding a nation while dealing with a population that included countless former soldiers and party members. Among them were many former Waffen-SS men, often young, experienced in war, and facing a difficult path forward. At first, the position of the Western Allies remained firm. Former Waffen-SS members were excluded from government jobs, pensions, and many parts of public life. But as West Germany began rebuilding at a rapid pace, reality started to clash with policy. The country needed workers, stability, and a way to reintegrate millions of former soldiers into society, setting the stage for major changes ahead. As tensions between East and West started rising, priorities began to shift fast. The early push for strict accountability slowly gave way to something more practical. West Germany needed stability, and just as important, it needed support from its own people. By the early 1950s, debates over veteran benefits were heating up inside the Bundestag, and one question kept coming up: what about former Waffen-SS soldiers? In 1950, a major law called the Federal War Victims Relief Act was introduced, aimed at helping injured veterans and families affected by the war. But it didn't take long before controversy exploded. Should former Waffen-SS members receive the same support as regular army soldiers? Some leaders argued that excluding them would only create more division. Others strongly disagreed. Still, political pressure kept building. Chancellor Konrad Adenauer eventually backed a more inclusive approach, warning that shutting out such a large group could have serious consequences. Then came a moment that turned heads. In 1953, Adenauer publicly stated that the men of the Waffen-SS had fought as soldiers just like others. That line carried huge weight and sparked intense debate. For many, it signaled a shift toward reintegrating these veterans into society. In practical terms, it meant that some former members could now qualify for limited pensions, especially those who were drafted later in the war rather than joining by choice. The conversation didn't stop there. By 1956, attention turned to West Germany's new military, the Bundeswehr. Could former Waffen-SS members serve again? Technically, yes, but reality told a different story. Out of more than 3,000 applicants, only about 500 were accepted. The rest were turned away due to background checks, past affiliations, or pressure from Allied advisors who were concerned about public perception. Even those who were accepted often stayed quiet about their past, choosing not to draw attention. Outside of government and military roles, many former Waffen-SS soldiers found their place in everyday life. They worked in factories, construction, or started small businesses. Their discipline and connections sometimes helped them move forward, but the label still followed them. Across towns and cities, many avoided talking about their past altogether, blending into a society that, at the time, preferred silence over reflection. But not everyone was willing to move on so quietly. For those who had suffered under the regime, the idea that former Waffen-SS members could receive benefits felt deeply unfair. Survivor groups and critical media outlets spoke out strongly, while others defended the policy as a step toward national unity. Even today, historians point out that rebuilding lives often happened faster than fully addressing the past. By the early 1960s, West Germany was booming economically, and for many former Waffen-SS men, life had become more stable. But beneath the surface, frustration was still there. Some felt they had been judged too harshly, while others believed their experiences had been misunderstood. Those feelings didn't just fade away, they started to organize. And that's where things took another turn. In the early 1950s, several former high-ranking officers came together to form a group called HIAG, the Mutual Aid Association of Former Waffen-SS Members. Founded in 1951 by figures like Paul Hauser, Otto Kuhm, and Felix Steiner, the organization began as a support network for veterans struggling to access benefits, but it quickly grew into something much bigger. HIAG wasn't just about financial help, it became a powerful voice shaping public discussion. Its leaders, many of them experienced and well-connected, pushed a clear message that the Waffen-SS was a regular fighting force separate from political actions. That idea gained traction in certain circles, especially among politicians looking to secure support from veteran communities. But as Germany's younger generation confronted the Nazi past more directly during the 1970s, public tolerance began to erode. Historians and journalists exposed HIAG's revisionist tendencies and its efforts to minimize war crimes. In 1978, a Der Spiegel investigation revealed HIAG's deep political ties and attempts to pressure officials on pension reforms. The scandal marked a turning point. Mainstream political parties began to distance themselves, and HIAG's credibility weakened. Yet the group remained active for another decade, sustained by aging veterans determined to defend their version of history. By the 1980s, HIAG's membership was declining. The association fought local battles over memorials and cemetery plaques, while anti-fascist organizations protested Waffen-SS reunions. In 1992, facing dwindling ranks and public disapproval, HIAG officially dissolved. When HIAG disbanded in 1992, many believed the debate over the Waffen-SS would finally fade into history. But the legacy of those men and the myths surrounding them proved remarkably persistent. Even decades after the last Waffen-SS divisions ceased to exist, their story continues to shape discussions of war memory, justice, and national identity in Germany and beyond. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, reunified Germany started to confront its wartime past more openly. Newly opened archives and survivor testimonies revealed how Waffen-SS units operated alongside the security police and Einsatzgruppen, disproving the long-standing myth of a clean, purely military force. Yet even as scholarship dismantled these illusions, political and social controversies emerged. In the 1990s, journalists discovered that some former Waffen-SS members were still receiving state pensions under the old Federal War Victims Relief Act. Reports in Der Spiegel and the New York Times sparked outrage, especially when it became clear that many Holocaust survivors had never received comparable compensation. Successive German governments debated reforms, but pension laws, rooted in post-war legal compromises, proved difficult to undo. Beyond Germany's borders, the Waffen-SS legacy took on new and troubling forms. In parts of Eastern Europe, especially the Baltic states and Ukraine, veterans of locally recruited SS divisions began to be commemorated as national fighters against Soviet occupation. Annual marches in Riga honoring the 15th and 19th Latvian SS divisions drew sharp criticism from Jewish organizations and the European Parliament. These events underscored how the image of the Waffen-SS had become entangled with post-Soviet identity politics. Inside Germany, attitudes shifted again. By the 2000s, open admiration for the Waffen-SS was taboo. Displaying SS symbols was banned under Section 86A of the Criminal Code. Yet far-right groups online continued to use SS imagery, portraying the Waffen-SS as models of strength or European brotherhood. German authorities have cracked down repeatedly, calling it a threat to democracy. In academic circles, the conversation moved from moral judgment to historical context. Scholars like Sönke Neitzel and Peter Longerich analyzed how ideology, discipline, and violence fused within the Waffen-SS structure. Their research emphasized that the organization was never separate from Nazi politics, it was its armed extension. At the same time, social historians explored how post-war Germany's silence toward the Waffen-SS reflected the nation's broader struggle with guilt and memory. Today, few Waffen-SS veterans remain. Their associations have vanished, but their legacy endures in the debates, books, and myths that still surround them. 80 years later, their story remains a warning about how easily history can be reshaped and how long its echoes can last.